Each one of your documents are the same. I just picked this one to go through because it just happens to be the first one in the list. And we'll go over every one of these one at a time, so you guys are familiar with the documentation procedure. Again, all revisions are located in the very beginning of it, so depending on what revision it is, if you look down here at the bottom of the page, it'll tell you what the revision number is. And you can't mess this up. I mean, again, these documents, the way they're written out, you'll know what document you're dealing with. Everything's written right down inside there. It tells you what doc it is. You'll always have 3880 at the beginning of it, because that's our 4-digit number for documents here at Distek. But then always, the next number that's followed after, the next 4-digit number, is the apparatus you're working on. 2100 says 2100, 25 says 25, 6100, 6300 says it up in there, 7100 says it up in there, and then it's followed by a 2-letter acronym for what section of the document you're using. Right now we're in the General Protocol section. It says GP, General Protocol. It will also say GP over here also. 2100 series, GP. Has your revision numbers right there. It has the revision date, which should match the last entry for revision and date number here also. Every one of the revisions talks about what was changed in the document from the previous edition. Hypothetically, the A version that came out had no errors. Well, it did, but at the time it was released, it didn't have anything written for revision A. Revision A, as a matter of fact, revision A, released. That's what it says. And everything in any document we have has revision A, the date and initial release. And revision B will tell you whatever got changed in the document. You can always find the revision and the revisions that were changed and altered in every document located in the first section, the GP section. All the way up to the last one that was done. Then we get into the table of contents, which is the same as every document is the same way. It'll go through it and it's laid out the same way. Title page, revision history, table of contents. In the table of contents, it talks about every one of these things. And then as I'm going through this, I want you to understand that this is your description on how the document's laid out. Here's where you start getting into actual executable files. All these things are executables. When it says F next to it, it's a folio. It's going to have an executable instead of just text. And what I mean here, when we talked about it at the bottom, it says text only. So this is a reading section. So we're going to get into the general information. It talks about how every binder is laid out. In fact, most of the wording is the same in every single one of the documents. It talks about the contents of this binder, how it's going to certify the unit, what we're going to do, what the scope of this binder covers, how to tell whether it's authentic, how the binder is organized. It talks about all of it there. And also talking about what we talked about in the PowerPoint presentation. The protocols, what each one of the acronyms stands for. IQ, MQ, PM, how there will be GP in every single document. Document number. It tells exactly what I was talking about before, how it's laid out. 3880- whatever the document you have in front of you. Binder approval, revision number and revision date. Change control, tables of contents, what the acronyms all stand for, the difference between text and executable pages, binder usage, acceptance criteria. It says right here, the acceptance criteria for each task or activity is specified with a description of the task or activity in respective folio. It will tell you what the pass or fail is on every single one of the data entry points on the document. So when we get into there, you'll see what we're talking about. Talks about any reference manuals and other documents that are needed with our document, where it was originated from, what it was written from, system description, and how it can be configured. Obviously, our different baths can be configured differently, different positions. We could have 1 to 8 positions on the 7100. The 2100 could have 6 to 8 positions, and it can be set up for 1, 2, or 4 liter baths configurations. All that's written down in here, and it describes it. And it gets to that section I was telling you about before, responsibilities. Talks here what the customer's responsibility is, which is basic. You guys have probably read this before, or at least even know of it, what the customer's responsibilities are. Basically just to, after the initial setup and installation of the unit, make sure they maintain the unit in good working order. They're not, again, it's their unit. They can, if they want it, they can throw it out the window. But they can do whatever they want, which they, quite frankly, they do sometimes. They beat the heck out of them. But it talks about what they'll be responsible for, arranging to have the shipment delivered to the installation site from wherever it's warehouse, so that you have it in front of you, so you can install it in a timely fashion. I know that doesn't always work that way. I've been in a lot of places where I waited half a day for the units to get delivered to the bench that I need to install them on, but that's their responsibility, and it is outlined in the document. So, it also talks about they have the responsibility of reviewing and approving the executed documents. By the time you get on site, again, the customer is always right, I understand that, but by the time you get on site, theoretically, they should have already reviewed the document. Hopefully they have. That's why we sent it out to them beforehand. And there's a pre-approval section. Hopefully they signed it off. That's their responsibility. They should have been. They should have already done that. They'll be responsible for safekeeping of all the documents. So when you're done with it and you hand it back to them, hopefully they are responsible enough to store it in a timely fashion, because we're not taking it. I don't know how you do it anywhere. I don't know. Hopefully you're not photocopying this and keeping your own records. If you do, then that's up to you. But here at Distek, when we perform a qualification, when we're done, we give them all the paperwork. And the customer's in charge of keeping all the paperwork. We don't keep any for the only thing we keep on record for us is a written receipt that we perform the services that they asked for, that they purchased. And it's like a one-sheet customer service form that we fill out. It has their signature and the technician's signature on it, but their document, the binder that I just gave you right there, once you fill all that out, they get to keep it. So I don't know if that's how you do it, if you do it any differently wherever you're from, but here that's how we do it. Again, it talks about pre-validating, what the validation execution is going to be, what the post-validation execution is going to be. Just basically talks about the responsibilities of both parties, what we're required to do. We're required to put, as the manufacturer of the unit or distributor that's selling the unit, to put a technician that's qualified, that has certificates that they're qualified, hence the reason you're all here, to get certificates. You're going to give them a copy of that certificate so that they know that you were trained properly and that you're executing it. You have proper tools with you. This is what we're supposed to provide to them.
Do you put an expiration date of the certificate, training certificate?
I don't know, we've been talking about that, we haven't decided yet what we're gonna put. Couple years, 5 years, maybe no date. I think there should be some kind of...
Patrick has before a long explanation why he didn't put expiration date.
Yeah, I know, that was Patrick.
Yeah.
I'm not Patrick.
Yeah.
We've talked about it. I don't know, I feel this isn't a money grab. I'm new in this seat. Whatever they charge your companies, or maybe you guys pay, or whatever it is that you came here to learn how to do all this, that's not my department. That's people above my head, they take care of that. For me, I want to make sure you guys are qualified enough, that you know what you're doing, that if you have any questions, I'm here. I'll do whatever I can to try and answer any questions. And once you leave here, I'll give you each my card. If you have a problem, email me. I'll do what I can to get you an answer. I promise you I'll get you an answer. It may not be in 2 hours, it may be in 2 days, but I will give you an answer if I don't have the answer ready available to me. Because I know most things, but I don't know everything, and if I don't know it, I'll go find the answer for you. That's one thing I can guarantee you. As far as the expiration date, I think there should be some kind of follow-up training at some point to ensure that you keep your skills up to date. Just from a training purpose, from a standpoint. I know it'd be nice to issue a carte blanche, a certificate that says you can work on all our units and it's good for the rest of your life. Okay, that's good, but 5 years from now, if you learn how to work on a 2500 here today, or tomorrow, or whenever it is this week, and you leave here, and 5 years from now you haven't touched one since the time you saw it in here, I can't say that you're really technically qualified to work on that unit. And I would think that you would want to come back in, or your company would want you to come back in and learn a little bit more about the unit because your skills have gotten rusty. I myself find myself in that hole at times. We manufacture, or have manufactured, since I've been here in 15 years, 28 pieces of apparatus that Distek has manufactured or sold with the Distek label on it. I've touched every one of them at one time or another, but I'm not qualified in every one of them right now. I know how to do most things, and I could probably figure out how to work on most things, given our document and just my familiarity with the unit, getting in front of it again. But I don't know if I could fix everything on it, or some of them I have to really scratch my head and read a lot to figure out how it works again, because I haven't been in front of one of these units in a couple of years sometimes. because they're old, they're legacy equipment, I haven't touched one like this. You know, we used to sell this integration system that was relabeled, repackaged underneath our name, a GD4. I haven't had one of them open in years, and if I got in front of one again, it'd probably take, I scratched my head for a couple hours trying to figure out how to work on it. When it used to be about an hour and a half, 2-hour qualification, it'd probably take me a day to do it right now, because I haven't been in front of one in probably 4 or 5 years. So, I don't know, me and David talked about it, other people in my department have talked about it. I haven't decided what date I'm gonna put on it yet. There's gonna be a date. I'm not gonna not put a date on it, but yeah, I may make it 5 years from now, maybe 3 years from now. I don't know, we'll talk. Before you leave this week, we'll have a date on there.
Yeah.
Anyways, getting into preliminary forms. Now, here's the executables. Again, everything up to this point here has been text only. This is the general purpose. We're getting into the actual executable folios, which is section right here. The first one, PF. Actually, PF2, because the first one was PF1, but this is a folio that is a executable form, meaning data needs to be entered. This is in every one of the general purpose, whether you're working on a 7100, 2100, 2500. Has customer name, location, and address. IQ, MQ, PM to checkbox off. If there's any addendums or amendments that need to be added, which is on the next page. And it tells you have to write down the revision number of each one of the documents you're executing. Typically here in our company, here in the United States, whatever we're performing, we do GP, we'll put the revision number and the date. If we're not performing it, well, GP will be there. The next one's IQ. If you're performing an IQ, revision and date go in there. If you're not performing it, we typically NA it and initial and date it. Most companies here in the United States don't like any blank spots showing up in their documents, so we're NAing and initial and dating a lot of places in the documents. Same thing with MQ and PM. This here is for your customer. Hopefully they pre-approved it. That's where they have a review by and approved by, so they can go through whatever chain of custody they want to in their company, their QC department. In fact, it's got a space there for 3 different names on each section. So if they want to have 6 people review it, they can have 6 people review it. If they need more, make a new document and include another page. There are a lot of companies that have a lot of people that need to earn a paycheck. And down here, there's typically 2 spots. The reason there's 2 spots it works well for me because I'm out training people. When I train somebody here, I bring them in, they do the sit down like you're doing right here. When we bring new people in that we've hired, and they'll sit down for 2 or 3 weeks in here going through some board work like this, some hands-on work, and then they'll go out into the field for a couple of weeks with me or with somebody else, like a mentor, that will do the work, but have them start doing a little bit of it. And that's where the second initial and date may come in. So we always have 2 spots on our documents for initial and date, at least a minimum of 2. I think one of our documents has 3, but there's going to be at least 2 places for somebody to sign. And also the same chances, you may be in the middle of a qualification. We all got families. I don't know. I know I do. I have a wife and a daughter at home. If something was to happen to my daughter and I had to leave in the middle of the day and leave a document open, somebody else could come behind me and finish the document. So there's an extra space for them to actually put initial and date in it also. The amendment and addendum page. Again, as I said, different laboratories, different companies might have an internal SOP. They might want you to perform something that's not in our test. This would be a spot to put down here. You could put down as follows, and you could write down whatever procedure it is they wanted to do. We've had some customers that wanted, extra temperatures mapping done. Like we typically do all our testing at 37 degrees. There was one company, like I said, I brought that 40 degrees up because they wanted to run it at 40 degrees. They wanted to make sure that it was working right. So we simply wrote down that on page blah, 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 the temperature test of 37 and 40 will be measured, 40 degrees will be written down here, or on it might have been a separate page. We wrote down the temperature, or what the result was.
So what else by definition we can put in amendment, for example? Is there any other example we can put in amendment?
You can put anything down if you want in there. Whatever if that's for the customer to define.
Yeah.
If the customer wants you to add anything into the document that's not already there, you can write it down on the amendment page. And you can indicate on the preceding page, because here's your first page of the document, has a serial number and everything else, you can put down amendment right here, yes.
Yeah, if it's nothing in amendment, you put
you put none, you put no there, and then on the next page, you would simply NA it.
Mm-hmm.
There's an NA spot right here, NA, and I typically just line out across in a additional date.
For example, last time when I qualified 4300, I noticed an additional 1 minute for infinity RPM,
Mhm.
and I didn't know should I put in an amendment or just a comment.
Oh, you're talking about with the, that additional minute?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
so I
Like 2500.
just put a comment I didn't put into this.
I usually don't put it on that page. I'll
Yeah,
put it on
so
the,
that's okay.
here.
Comment place, yeah, on the end or something.
Here, final forms?
Yeah, there.
I usually put it here.
Yeah, this is, yeah, what I.
I'll write it down right there.
Okay.
I'll write down as follows, and that, because that extra minute needs to be, that just came up. The 7100, they changed that on the 7100 in February 2014, and they changed it on the 2500
Okay.
in March of this year. So that extra minute, and that's for sampling. I don't know if you guys all know. When we get to the units, I'll talk about that, but he's talking about infinity RPM. Excuse me. He's talking about infinity RPM. On our, on the infinity RPM, originally, our original documents, it's still written that way when we get to it. On the 7100 and the 2500, when you do a normal, let's see, MQ1 requires you to do an infinity run and measure 1 minute for infinity. So you're doing a 1 minute run, infinity, measuring it, and, right, so that's what it requires you to do. You're supposed to take a timer, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this, for the 25 and the 7100, you take a timer, and what happens is, it starts spinning at, I think it's 100 RPM. So it starts up at 100 RPM. It used to be for 1 minute, you're not measuring that first minute, but it now does it for 2 minutes. The reason it does it for 2 minutes is because in the firmware, for 7100, they did it in February of last year, and 2500, they did it in March of this year. They changed the firmware. Originally, it used to spin at 100 RPM for 1 minute, and then it did infinity at 250 for 1 minute. And you're required to measure at this point right here with a timer. Well, what happened was, they talked with a couple of the laboratories that were using our instruments, and they were like, well, if you were to do a, let's say, 30-minute run at 100 RPM, you're not allowing us to make a sample of that media at 30 minutes. If we ran a 30-minute test, or a 1 minute test. You're not giving us time to sample. So we need a 1 minute buffer. So what they did was they programmed for an additional minute, automatically, without you even programming it in. If you set up a 30-minute run, it would run for 31 minutes, because at the end of 30 minutes, it would prompt you for a sample, and it gives you 1 minute to make your samples, to pull a sample off of there. And then after that 1 minute, it would kick it up to 250. And we're required in our document, in this document, in the 7100 and the 2500 document, to measure 1 minute infinity RPM, 60 seconds with an external timer. However, with this new firmware, because it's infinity, you're setting it for 1 minute, it also programs an additional minute. So instead of being able to test for 60 seconds, it spins for 120 seconds. So that's where you're talking about having to write this additional thing on down here. This is what he's referring to. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, have you encountered that at all? It's a shortcoming in our engineering department not communicating to the service department, the changes they were making in the document, or I should say with the firmware. And because they did that, I now have to rewrite the document, because the document doesn't cover that. So right now, you have to write a amendment, or write down in the corrective action area how you're going to do the testing. Where actually, you could measure for 2 minutes if you want to. You can simply measure it and make sure that it runs at least for a minute for the RPM. I think it counts down after 1 minute, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Doesn't it run for 1 minute and then you get a timer that counts down after the 1 minute?
It just,
It goes up and comes
infinity
back
time,
down?
it's just, instead of 1 minute, it runs for 2 minutes.
Yes, it runs for 2.
So, and then in document it's written, it's gonna be
Instead of
1
1
minute,
minute.
but,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the notice, last time notice it took me 2 minutes, and then I start wondering what I did wrong.
You're deviating from it. Everybody wants to know why you're
Then I
deviating.
go Jose, and he said, oh, that is a change, but nobody told me before for that change.
We didn't know, they changed it without telling us, engineering. They
Yeah,
programmed the
yeah,
firmware,
yeah.
and we didn't find out until the first customer complained about it.
Yeah.
So, That was on there, so we have to change our document to conform it, but that's what he's talking about. So, again, getting back to the document itself, if you have any discrepancies in the run, anything you want to add, if there's something up front the customer wants to change, that's usually I'll write down in the amendment page. If there's additional testing the customer wants, I usually put that up here on this amendment page. So that would be, the customer would tell you from the get-go. If it's something you encounter during the test that you need to make a corrective action on, or you need to explain, that's where I put it on that other page that I was telling you about. The third page of this document, of the executables, has everything centric to the location and the instrument itself. What kind of system it is, the configuration it is, whether it's a new or a used unit, place for the purchase order, or the service order number, serial numbers of the units that we used. In this case, there's a thermocirculator attached, TCS. So right here would be the serial number of the unit. The serial number of the TCS goes below it. Anything the customer might have put onto the unit to signify it for their own purposes, you can include in there. Here in the States, they like to have all the asset number and the instrument ID number. That all gets attached. There's a spot here for all the vessels, paddle blades, shafts, baskets, all the things that have serial numbers attached to them. We have a place to put them down there so they know that they're keeping those attached. Theoretically, they should have anything that's qualified for one position, so stay in that one location. Location, address, building number, department number, primary checklist. All these things are self-explanatory. You should have an operation manual with every unit. It should already be there with the unit. The customer had it beforehand. All these get checked off because they're all available. Qualification binder, that's what you're executing. That's there. Toolkit, you should have a toolkit and certificates for anything that you're using. That should be there. Training certificate that you're getting. Duly completed protocol review and pre-approval form, that was the first page we looked at. This one is the second page we looked at. This one is the third page that we looked at. Now we're on the fourth page of it. This is where all your hand tools that you're going to be making measurements with are going to go on that page. Everything's traceable. I don't know, I'm assuming regulatory commissions in your countries do the same thing. Here, they have to have the NIST traceables, which is a National Institute of Standards traceability for here in the States. We have to have everything NIST traceable, so everything we have has a certificate with it. It gets on an annual basis. And again, like I said, back to the final forms. This right here, anything that pops up during your qualification that needs to be explained. If we also have the availability here, if it's lengthy and you need to write down a novel, I try to write down the least amount of information I have to explain what's going on. I don't like to go on and on and on. I know there's been some Pat you referred to before. I've worked with him before. He likes to write a 3-page novel on anything that he does. I like to write a 1-sentence item that explains what I did. But if you choose, if you want to write anything lengthy,